Imagine standing on a windswept Korean mountain. It's the crisp fall air of 1978.
Right. You're probably expecting a quiet, peaceful devotional.
Exactly. You are there to listen to a religious leader deliver a prayer. But as the words echo across the peak, what you are hearing sounds less like a traditional prayer and a lot more like a United Nations geopolitical briefing.
Yeah, spliced with like a cosmic battle plan. It's wild.
It is sweeping, it's intensely political, and the speaker is audaciously claiming the power to, rewrite the rules of the afterlife. Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are unpacking a truly fascinating historical document with you to understand how it weaves together Cold War anxieties, national trauma, and a massive spiritual mobilization.
The text we are examining today is a prayer delivered by Reverend Sun Myung Moon on October 14th, 1978. It's officially titled A Victorious Prayer for Korea and the Heavenly Nation.
And he delivered it at the Cheonsung Mountain Holy Ground, right?
Yes, exactly. Now, just to set the ground rules for you listening, as your guides today, we are not here to debate the theology or take political sides.
No, not at all.
We are essentially putting on our architectural hard hats to look at the blueprint of how this text tries to mobilize a nation. We will impartially explore the ideas, the historical context, and the incredible rhetoric contained strictly within the boundaries of this specific prayer.
Right, we're looking at this as a remarkable piece of historical framing. And to understand that framing, we have to look at the immediate context the speaker sets up before he even, gets to the global politics.
The personal history he brings in right at the start.
Exactly. Right at the top, we are told this event marks the 28th commemoration of Reverend Moon's release from the Hungnam concentration camp.
Which is a huge detail.
It really is. So immediately, this isn't just a peaceful retreat in nature. It is heavily anchored in the memory of profound literal captivity and survival.
Yeah, surviving Hungnam wasn't just a difficult experience. It was a brutal life-or-death ordeal in a literal fertilizer factory.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize it was a fertilizer factory.
Yeah, under the North Korean regime. And he also mentions remembering a workshop held exactly 10 years prior at that same location, centering on someone he refers to as the late President Yu.
Right, I saw that. Who is President Yu, and why is he being brought up in the first few breaths of this prayer?
So Hayo Won-yu was the first president of the Unification Church. He was a foundational figure who helped systematize their core theological texts.
Okay, that makes sense.
By invoking both his own survival of a labor camp and the memory of this foundational president, the speaker is creating a bedrock of endurance.
Like a foundation of shared trauma.
Exactly. The physical trauma and release of the leader are being mapped directly onto the spiritual journey of the entire movement. It tells the listener, hey, we have survived the absolute worst, and that gives us the authority to face what is coming.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the way he describes what is coming, and specifically the nation of Korea, is incredibly stark.
It's very bleak.
It is. He repeatedly pleads for God's protection and explicitly describes Korea as being in the miserable position of the orphan.
The orphan. Yeah, that specific word is so loaded.
And then the prayer suddenly shifts into this massive global threat assessment. He literally cites the political situation of Japan, the position of China and the Soviet Union, and the reality of the present domestic and international policies of the United States.
It reads like a State Department memo.
Right. Korea is portrayed like this small, vulnerable wooden boat, completely surrounded by massive, nuclear-armed naval dreadnoughts. I have to ask, how common is it for a deeply spiritual mountaintop prayer to read off a laundry list of global superpowers like that?
Oh, it is highly unusual. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, framing Korea as an orphan nation surrounded by these giants generates an immense, almost suffocating sense of urgency.
Because of the Cold War.
Exactly. We have to view this through the lens of 1978. The Cold War is a very present, very dangerous reality. You've got the Sino-Soviet split ongoing.
And the U.S. was changing its stance too, right?
Yeah, the United States, under the Carter administration, had been openly discussing withdrawing troops from South Korea.
Oh, wow. So they felt totally abandoned.
Precisely. The Korean peninsula is geographically and politically caught right in the crosshairs of shifting superpower alliances. The physical geopolitical vulnerability of the nation is exactly the reason why divine protection is being begged for.
The dread was real.
Very real. The speaker is taking the geopolitical dread of his followers and providing a theological container for it.
He even says that if the enemies celebrate victory, it would be a day when, quote, Heaven and earth would be filled with darkness.
That's heavy.
Yeah, I mean, that is not framed as a minor political shift or a change in a trade agreement. That is framed as an apocalyptic failure.
Because the geopolitical crisis is being elevated to a cosmic crisis. The stakes aren't just about borders anymore. They are about the survival of light versus darkness.
Which is a pretty effective way to get people's attention.
It is a brilliant rhetorical way to mobilize a group of people. When the threat is that massive, when the enemy's winning, means the darkness of the entire earth and heaven, you cannot afford to be passive.
You have to do something.
You have to act. The sheer scale of the threat demands an equally massive response, which leads the speaker to pivot from describing the global dreadnoughts to prescribing a highly specific timeline for his followers.
Right, because once the terrifying reality of those global dreadnoughts is established, the focus snaps back to the speaker and his followers. He talks about having fought persecution in America.
Which was happening around that same time.
Yeah, and he frames that personal struggle as a sacrifice made entirely on behalf of Korea. He says that a people without a nation is woeful indeed.
That orphan concept again.
Exactly. And he claims that God protected him and placed upon him the name of Victor. And then, armed with this title of Victor, he issues an urgent call to the members of the Unification Church.
He tells them to march forward.
He tells them to march forward over the next 3 years to make Korea a nation that heaven cannot abandon.
Notice the specific language of substitution and sacrifice happening there. He asks them to struggle so that Korea isn't abandoned as a sacrificial offering.
Wow, sacrificial offering.
Yeah. He notes that the sons and daughters gathered on the mountain are ready to offer their own blood, sweat, and tears on the altar of heaven.
It's very visceral.
The theology here dictates that they are substituting their own effort and suffering to spare the nation from being the victim of those surrounding superpowers.
Here's where it gets really interesting. He doesn't just say, work hard until we win.
No, he gives a date.
He gives a hard, non-negotiable deadline. He specifically prays that the third 7-year course will be finished in 1981.
1981, 3 years away from when he's speaking.
Right. He gives a 3-year deadline for God, all mankind, and Korea to be happy, and for heaven and earth to be proud of the Unification Church.
I need some context here. What exactly is a 7-year course, and why are they on the third one?
Okay, so in unification theology, history and spiritual restoration are heavily structured around mathematical timelines.
It's like numerology.
Somewhat, yeah. They are often divided into periods of 7 years. These courses represent stages of growth. Typically, it's formation, growth, and completion.
Ah, got it. 3 stages.
Exactly. So the third 7-year course represents the final stage of the specific era of spiritual and organizational foundation building.
So by 1981, they had to be done.
Yes. By 1981, this entire massive structural effort is supposed to be completed, bringing about a fundamental shift in the world's spiritual reality.
But, I mean, doesn't a hard deadline like 1981 carry an astronomical risk?
How do you mean?
Well, I compare this to a corporate quarterly goal. If a CEO says, we will dominate the market by Q3, and Q3 comes and goes, the stock tanks.
Oh, sure.
If you tell your followers they are on a divine cosmic mission to make the universe happy and secure Korea by 1981, and 1981 arrives with the Cold War still raging and Korea still divided, doesn't that risk total disillusionment?
You'd think so, yeah.
Doesn't the movement just collapse under the weight of its own failed deadline?
That is the perpetual danger of prophetic deadlines. But we have to look at the immediate psychological utility of that deadline in 1978.
Okay, what was the utility?
When you are dealing with grand existential dread, like the combined threats of the Soviet Union, China, and shifting U.S. policies, people can easily become paralyzed.
Yeah, it's just too big to think about.
It is simply too big for one person to process. By giving the blood, sweat, and tears a specific endpoint, like a 3-year sprint to 1981, you are doing 2 vital things.
Which are?
First, you are telling people that their suffering has a finish line. It makes the burden bearable.
Right, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
Exactly. Second, you are transforming a group of people who just describe themselves as a woeful, trampled orphan into highly active participants.
Oh, I see. They aren't just sitting in the pews waiting around to be rescued. They're on a 3-year tactical mission to save the universe.
Yes. They are being told they must actively earn God's protection. The timeline makes the abstract concept of spiritual salvation feel tangible and deeply urgent.
It gives them agency.
It demands immediate focus, which pushes away the paralysis of the Cold War. But, you cannot just tell people to save the world in 3 years without giving them a methodology.
Right.
You need a plan. You need a strategy. And the strategy outlined in this prayer is perhaps the most fascinating part of the document.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't involve fighting on the global stage at all.
No.
No, it involves fighting at the neighborhood level.
Oh, that is interesting. Because to counter these massive geopolitical forces by 1981, the members aren't told to become diplomats or generals or, run for office.
Not at all.
They are asked to become the high priests of home church. They are tasked with establishing what the text calls the tribal realm, representing the substantial Adamic realm.
Yes, the Adamic realm.
I want to pause right there. Adamic, as in Adam and Eve. How on earth does organizing a local neighborhood home church relate to the Garden of Eden?
So the underlying theology here posits that human history fractured at the very beginning at the family level with Adam and Eve.
Okay, the original sin.
Right. And every global conflict, including the Cold War and the division of Korea, is viewed as a macro symptom of that original micro-failure.
Oh, wow. So the Cold War is just Adam and Eve's failure scaled up.
That's how they see it.
Yeah.
Therefore, to fix the world, you do not start at the United Nations. You start by fixing the family unit.
That actually makes a bizarre kind of sense in that framework.
It's internally consistent, yeah. The home church is an initiative where members are tasked with serving and ministering to a specific number of homes in their neighborhood. They are essentially adopting them to form a new tribe.
Okay.
By doing this, they believe they are recreating the unfallen, perfect family structure, the substantial Adamic realm from the ground up.
And he does this by invoking a very specific authority, right? He proclaims these things in the name of true parents.
Yes, that's crucial.
He literally commands all the good spirits and the angelic world to appear wherever his followers are present, so long as they are centering on this home church concept.
That's right.
Before we get to the angels, what does true parents mean in this context?
True parents is the central theological title for Reverend Moon and his wife. In their doctrine, because the original parents of humanity, Adam and Eve, failed to establish a sinless lineage, God needed a restored, sinless couple to finally fulfill that role.
To offer spiritual rebirth to humanity.
Exactly. When he speaks in the name of true parents, he is invoking the ultimate authority of having solved that original historical sin. That is the authority he uses to start issuing commands to the spiritual world.
Which brings us to the absolute twist of the document.
The amnesty.
Yes. He commands the good angels to help out, which, you might expect in a prayer. But then he brings up the evil spirits.
This part is so unique.
The text states that up until this point, evil spirits were blocked from receiving any benefit. But he declares, right there on the mountain, that from this time forward, these evil spirits may receive assistance by helping their descendants.
It's a massive theological shift.
So what does this all mean? Because to me, this sounds exactly like a supernatural community service sentence.
That's actually a great way to put it.
Like, you did terrible things in life, but if you go down to earth and help your great-grandkids build this home church neighborhood project, you get parole. Is he literally rewriting the rules of the afterlife?
That community service analogy is incredibly accurate to the mechanics of this theology. In their framework, the spiritual world and the physical world are deeply interdependent.
And need each other.
Yes. Disembodied spirits, even evil ones, or those stuck in lower spiritual realms, cannot grow or achieve salvation on their own. They require a physical base. They need living humans.
Oh, I see.
What's fascinating here is that by declaring this new rule, the speaker is creating a symbiotic relationship.
Between the living and the dead.
Right. The living members need supernatural help to hit their impossible 1981 deadline, and the trapped ancestors need the living members' physical actions to earn their own spiritual credit, or, like you said, parole.
He is acting as a legislator for the spiritual realm. He states he is utilizing what he calls a supranational, super-religious, and super-tribal foundation.
Those are massive words.
Yeah, supranational. It means operating above and beyond all existing borders, governments, and belief systems.
The sheer scale of the authority being claimed is staggering. He is explicitly stating that he is instructing the spirit world to follow a new directive.
It's mind-blowing.
And for you listening, think about how this architectural framework actually operates on a psychological level. We started with grand, overwhelming global anxieties.
The fear of being an orphan nation crushed by the Soviet Union and China.
Exactly. And how do you manage that anxiety? You give the individual a hyper-local responsibility.
Knocking on doors.
You tell them to go knock on doors and serve a home church of a few hundred houses. but you infuse that local, everyday action with universe-altering importance.
You're not just organizing a neighborhood group. You are literally commanding angels and offering redemption to your dead ancestors.
Right.
The geopolitical dreadnoughts suddenly don't matter as much because you hold the keys to the spiritual dimension that governs them.
The prayer brings us all together in its final, most sweeping request. He prays that all the things you have granted and all the things that are newly declared be bound together and be decided in both the physical and spiritual world.
So what happens here physically locks in what happens there spiritually.
That's the belief.
The everyday actions of these members, their blood, sweat, and tears over those 3 years, are given supreme cosmic weight. If they succeed in their living rooms and their neighborhoods, they believe they are shifting the balance of power in the spiritual realm.
And if they shift the spiritual realm,
That, in turn, supposedly neutralizes the physical threats of the Soviet Union and China against Korea. It is an incredibly intricate, closed-loop system of belief.
it is a profound mechanism of empowerment for the believer. You are no longer a helpless citizen of an orphaned nation. You are a high priest whose localized actions echo into eternity.
You redeem the dead and ultimately alter the geopolitical landscape.
The physical world drives the spiritual world, which then reshapes the physical world.
It really is an astonishing journey to recap.
It covers so much ground.
We started this deep dive anchored in the grim memory of a literal concentration camp at Hungnam. That is the ultimate symbol of powerlessness and physical captivity.
Yes.
And from there, the text zooms way out to hover over the massive geopolitical chessboard of 1978, identifying the very real, very terrifying threats surrounding the Korean Peninsula.
A naval dreadnought.
Right. Then it zooms back in to slap a strict 3-year blood, sweat, and tears deadline on the followers to fix that global crisis.
By 1981.
And finally, it reaches upward, completely bypassing earthly governments like the U.S. or the USSR to command angels and offer a community service amnesty loophole to evil spirits based entirely on neighborhood volunteer work.
The text is a masterclass in rhetorical escalation and theological mechanics. And as we remind you, the listener, our goal today wasn't to validate the theology, the specific geopolitical claims, or the spiritual mechanisms made in this 1978 prayer.
Right, we're just analyzing the architecture.
Exactly. We wanted to examine it impartially to understand how a specific group of people were mobilized during a deeply anxious time in history.
Regardless of your own beliefs, the scale and ambition of that rhetoric is undeniably gripping to analyze. It takes an immense amount of conviction to stand on a mountain, look at the Cold War happening around you, and issue binding orders to the afterlife to fix it.
It really does. And that actually brings up a final thought for you to ponder, building on the underlying mechanics of this source material.
Oh, what's that?
Well, the prayer concludes with that striking assertion we just discussed, right? That all things newly declared are bound together and decided in both the physical and spiritual worlds simultaneously.
Yes, the binding declaration.
The speaker fundamentally operates on the belief that speaking these words aloud on a mountaintop literally rewrites the rules for ancestors, angels, and nations. It relies on the absolute power of declaration.
The idea that language itself is the architecture of reality.
Exactly. While you might not be attempting to restructure the spiritual realm or redirect the Cold War, it begs a broader question for your own life. How much does the language you use every day actually shape the reality and the history you experience?
Oh, that's a great question.
When you declare a boundary or voice a goal out loud or establish a new rule for your own family, how much does that spoken word alter your personal universe?
That's powerful.
What if the words we speak carry far more architectural power over our lives, our psychology, and our communities than we ever realize?
That is a brilliant point to leave off on. We started with the image of a leader standing on a mountain, using words to try and push back naval dreadnoughts and command angels.
Yeah.
It really does make you wonder about the invisible weight and the binding power of the things we say out loud every single day. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Thanks for listening.
We hope it gave you a new lens through which to view history, the mechanics of rhetoric, and maybe even your own words. Keep questioning, keep exploring, and we will see you next time.